In the quiet town of Conley, Texas, the sheriff's home was the last place anyone expected horror to unfold. Sheriff Roy Bradford had served his community for over 15 years. He was respected, feared, and known for his no-nonsense demeanor. But on a rainy Tuesday morning, neighbors were awoken by the smell, not of smoke, but something far worse. When deputies entered Roy's kitchen, they found what no one could ever prepare for. Something was boiling in a large pot on the stove. Something that should never have been there. And Roy? He was sitting calmly at the table, waiting to be arrested. What triggered it all? A discovery, he claimed, shattered everything I believed about my life. This is one of the most shocking stories you'll ever hear, one that blurs the line between love, identity, and deadly betrayal. You're watching Dark Motives, and what you're about to hear isn't a movie script. It's a real case that left an entire town speechless and turned a respected lawman into a headline nobody saw coming. This story will disturb you. It will challenge everything you think you know about trust, secrets, and the people closest to us. It begins with a marriage built on a lie, and it ends with a pot on a stove, boiling. If you're into true crime stories that go beyond the headlines, where every detail matters and nothing is held back, then hit that subscribe button now and turn on the bell. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we reveal motives. And as you watch, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We see viewers from all over, and we read every single comment. Ready? Because what Sheriff Roy Bradford discovered in his own home didn't just destroy his marriage, it rewrote his entire identity. Let's go back to where it all started. Roy Eugene Bradford was born and raised in Lufkin, a small East Texas town where reputation meant everything, and secrets didn't stay buried for long. From a young age, Roy was known as a protector, the kind of kid who stood between bullies and their targets, the kind who always spoke with conviction, even when he was wrong. His father was a Vietnam vet, cold, disciplinarian, no room for softness, no patience for lies. Roy grew up believing that being a man meant being in control of yourself, of your family, of your truth. By the time he turned 20, Roy had already joined the police academy. He rose quickly, too quickly for some, but Roy had a way of making things happen. He was sharp, methodical, and never let emotion cloud his decisions. He wasn't the smiling type. He didn't do small talk. But if Roy was your sheriff, you slept easy at night. Conley County elected him at 32. He brought law and order, cracked down on gang activity, cleaned up drug rings, and even helped reform the local jail system. People trusted him. Deputies admired him. He ran his household the same way he ran his department: structured, silent, strict. But behind all that discipline was a man who didn't like being questioned, a man who needed to be needed. And when his first marriage fell apart, the story went quiet. No press, no scandal, just Roy, alone again. Until 5 years later, when he married someone new. Someone nobody in town really knew. She was quiet, beautiful, respectful. Everything Roy wanted, and everything he didn't realize could destroy him. Her name was Elena Monroe. She moved to Texas from Louisiana sometime in 2017. No family, no friends, no digital footprint. Just a soft-spoken woman with deep brown eyes, flawless skin, and a calm presence that drew people in. The sheriff met her at a fundraiser, a local charity event for abused women and children. Elena worked the front table, signing people in, avoiding cameras, answering questions with short, careful words. Roy was immediately taken. He wasn't the kind of man to fall quickly, but with Elena, something shifted. She didn't ask about his job. She didn't push for attention. She made him feel seen, without trying. Within 2 months, they were seen in public. 6 months later, she moved into his home. And by the end of the year, they were married. A small ceremony in the back of a Baptist church, no guests outside of Roy's deputy and the pastor's wife. People in town found it odd, but didn't question it. After all, Roy Bradford didn't tolerate gossip. He had always been private. Now he was married, and smiling for the first time in years. But Elena, she was always just out of reach. She didn't work. She rarely left the house. She declined invites. She wore long sleeves in summer. And when asked about her past, she kept it vague. Said she had lost her parents in a house fire. Said she had no siblings. Said she was just grateful for peace and safety. Roy never pressed. But Elena had a routine. Every morning she'd walk around the property alone. She kept a locked chest in the bedroom she said held journals. She avoided mirrors and always triple-locked the bathroom door. There were no photographs of her as a child. No school records. No medical files. And Roy, the sheriff, never checked. He believed loving her meant not asking. But in truth, he didn't want to know. Until something happened that forced the truth into the light. At first glance, their marriage looked stable. Roy went to work early, came back around 7. Dinner was always on the table. Elena kept the house spotless, quiet, organized, almost like a showroom. But there was something off. Roy's friends noticed it before he did. She never kissed him in public, never sat too close, never held his hand when others were around. And every time someone complimented her, she shrank back, like she didn't want to be noticed. She slept in matching nightgowns, long silk, covering everything. She kept the bedroom dark, and when Roy tried to initiate intimacy, she'd always redirect. It's not the right time. I'm just tired. Let's talk instead. Months went by, then a year. Roy never spoke about it, but the tension began to show. He grew moodier at work, snapped at his deputies, lost weight, stayed out later, started drinking more. And once, when a deputy joked that Elena must be keeping him busy, Roy didn't laugh. Instead, he walked out of the room. At home, things were colder. Elena never raised her voice, but she had control. She set the schedules, decided what they ate, picked the shows they watched. Roy was used to being in charge, but somehow, in his own house, he wasn't. Then came the rumors. A woman at the grocery store said she saw Elena speaking to a man in a parked car, close, like they knew each other. Another said she saw her coming out of the public library with books on surgery and anatomy. A third claimed she saw Elena throwing something away at 2 a.m., a box wrapped in duct tape. Roy denied it all. He defended her, told people to stay out of his business. But the whispers grew louder. One night, after coming home late from a department meeting, Roy walked into the bedroom and saw Elena staring at herself in the mirror, tears in her eyes. When she noticed him, she flinched, then locked herself in the bathroom for over an hour. Roy didn't ask. He just sat on the edge of the bed and waited. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. And what happened next confirmed everything his gut had been screaming. It started with a single drawer. Roy was looking for a flashlight. Their power had gone out during a storm, and while rummaging through the hallway cabinet, his hand brushed against a small zippered pouch tucked far in the back. Inside were documents he had never seen before. 3 different state IDs, all with different last names, same face, slightly altered makeup. One from Louisiana, one from Georgia, one from Mississippi. Each one had a different birth date, different address. But the face was Elena's. Roy stared at the cards for a long time. His hands didn't shake. Not yet. He just sat there listening to the rain tap on the window and thinking. When he asked her the next morning about it, Elena didn't lie. She simply said, "I used to move around a lot. I didn't always feel safe." Roy didn't press, but that same day, he took a personal day from the department and began his own investigation. First, he ran her fingerprints through the national database, but nothing came up. Not criminal, not medical. Like she'd never existed before 2016. Then he went back to her origin story. The house fire in Louisiana. He called around. No such fire was ever reported under the Monroe name. No deaths that matched her supposed parents. No property loss. The story was fabricated. Still, Roy told himself there had to be an explanation. He didn't want to believe he'd been lied to, not like this, not this deep. Until he checked the medicine cabinet. Behind the vitamin bottles and sleeping pills, hidden in a small velvet pouch, were hormone injections, multiple vials, and syringes. The labels were faded, but the name on them was unmistakable. Aaron Monroe, not Elena. Roy's breath stopped in his chest. He didn't shout. He didn't confront her. He just sat in his patrol truck for 2 hours, engine off, staring into nothing. The woman he married wasn't who she said she was. The life he thought he built was a lie. And as someone who had devoted his whole career to enforcing the truth, he felt humiliated, exposed, and worst of all, enraged. But the rage didn't come all at once. It built slowly, over 2 weeks, until the night it finally snapped. Roy couldn't sleep. For 2 weeks, he pretended nothing was wrong. He went to work, came home, ate quietly, and said little. But his mind never stopped. Every glance at Elena became an autopsy. Every word she spoke was dissected, studied, doubted. He watched her more closely, the way she adjusted her shirt when bending down, how she always waited for him to fall asleep first, the subtle panic in her eyes when she forgot to wear her compression top before bed. Roy began leaving work early without explanation, sitting in his truck just down the street, watching his own home through binoculars. And what he saw one night unraveled everything. At 11:52 p.m., Elena took the trash out. That wasn't unusual. What was strange was what she was wearing. Tight jeans, makeup, a leather jacket. Nothing like her usual modest look. She looked different, confident, relaxed. She got into a silver sedan parked around the corner. Roy followed at a distance. They drove for nearly 40 minutes out of town to a dimly lit roadside diner. She went inside, sat in a booth, alone. Then he arrived. A man, tall, slim, dreadlocks tucked into a cap. They hugged, sat close, talked for over an hour. Roy took pictures, recorded everything, but he couldn't hear them. On the way home, Elena stopped at a gas station. Roy snuck to the pump beside her and cracked the passenger door. Inside her car, under a file folder on the front seat, was a letter, written in pen, folded, torn at the edges. He couldn't read the whole thing, but one line stood out. "I don't know how long I can keep living like this. Roy suspects something. I think he found the hormones." That was all he needed. Roy drove home ahead of her, parked on the neighbor's side, and entered through the back. He sat in the dark living room, shotgun propped against the table, waiting. When Elena walked in, she saw him instantly. She froze, eyes wide, purse slipped from her shoulder. He didn't speak. She said, "Roy." But he raised his hand. The silence between them was heavy, unbreakable. Then he asked one question. "What's your name?" She hesitated. When she finally said, "Aaron," it was barely a whisper. That was the last word ever spoken in that house. After Elena spoke her truth, the house fell silent. She stood there by the door, tears forming but not falling. Roy didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He just sat still, staring at her like she was a stranger who broke into his life and replaced the woman he married. In Roy's world, everything had a place, a label, a definition. Now, nothing did. He stood up, slowly, walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer. She didn't run. Maybe she thought he was still her husband. Maybe she believed love would protect her. Maybe she never thought the sheriff would break the law he swore to uphold. But when she followed him, he was already gripping the handle of the knife. A long, clean chef's knife, the one she used to make Sunday roasts. What happened in that kitchen was not sudden. It was quiet. Roy didn't shout. Elena didn't scream. He moved with purpose, driven not by chaos but by something colder, disgust, betrayal, a warped sense of justice. She tried to back away but slipped. Roy stepped forward. There were no neighbors close enough to hear. No pets, no cameras, no alarms. Only the sound of metal against tile, and breathing that slowly faded. When it was done, Roy didn't cry. He didn't panic. He didn't call anyone. He just stood over her, staring. And in his mind, it wasn't murder. It was removal. A lie had been living in his home, eating at his pride, corrupting his world. He walked to the garage, grabbed plastic sheets, covered the floors. Then he returned to the kitchen and began the next phase. Roy didn't cover the body right away. He turned off the kitchen lights, pulled the blinds down, and sat at the table, arms crossed, staring at the floor like he was solving a case. Not a murder. And in his mind, that's exactly what it was. This wasn't panic. It was procedure. He walked back to the garage and grabbed a cooler, the one he used on hunting trips. Then he rolled out the plastic sheets and laid towels underneath. Everything was clean, quiet, contained, no mess, no noise. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the steady breath of a man at work. Over the next 6 hours, Roy used every skill he had. Anatomical knowledge from crime scenes, field reports, morgue visits. He had seen worse, or so he thought. But this wasn't a stranger. This was Elena, the woman who called him my rock, the one who made him coffee every morning and kissed his forehead while he slept. And yet, here he was, preparing her like evidence. By dawn, the house smelled of bleach and boiled water. Neighbors noticed the windows were fogged up. A delivery man said the front porch light flickered all night. Someone down the street said they heard a saw running around 3 a.m. But nobody called it in. Not in Conley. Not at the sheriff's house. Inside, Roy had placed multiple pots on the stove, filled with water, spices, and vinegar. He believed he was purifying the remains, cleaning the lie. And when deputies knocked on his door later that day, responding to a missed call from dispatch, they found him in the kitchen, still wearing the same clothes, still sitting at the table. The stove was on. The smell was unbearable. One deputy vomited instantly, another screamed. Roy didn't move. He looked up, calm as ever, and said, "You can check the pot if you want. She was never real anyway." The news broke within the hour. But what shocked everyone more than the crime was the man who committed it. Roy Bradford was supposed to represent order, discipline, law. Now he was in handcuffs, sitting in the back of a squad car, his face blank, not angry, not remorseful, just empty. He said nothing during transport, didn't resist, didn't cry. At booking, when asked if he understood the charges, he replied, "I understand what had to be done." They placed him in isolation, not for his safety, but because deputies couldn't bear to look at him. Some wept, others cursed his name. One deputy had to be removed from duty after screaming at Roy through the glass. The town was paralyzed. People questioned everything, not just Roy but their own beliefs. How could this happen? How did no one see it coming? And who exactly had Elena been? An investigation into her identity revealed fragments. No criminal record, but she had changed her name 3 times. Born Erin Monroe. Transitioned privately in her mid-20s. Moved state to state, avoiding family, starting over. She had no history of violence, only fear. She never legally changed her gender marker, likely out of fear of exposure. And that fear had lived in her home every day. At trial, Roy's defense didn't argue innocence. They argued betrayal. His lawyer painted a picture of emotional collapse, that Roy was lied to, that his mind snapped, that his entire reality had been dismantled in a moment. But the prosecution didn't flinch. They presented cold facts. They showed the photos, the notes, the stove. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours. Guilty, life without parole. Roy never apologized, not once. When given the chance to speak at sentencing, he looked directly at the judge and said, "If you lived my life, you'd have done the same." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge lowered his gaze. And just like that, Sheriff Roy Bradford, once the symbol of law and order, was led away in shackles, disappearing behind the very bars he once guarded. Roy was sentenced and gone. Elena was buried under her legal name, Erin Monroe, No family came to claim the body. The town of Conley tried to move on, but the story wasn't over. 3 weeks after the trial, Conley County received a package. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside was a black journal, leather-bound, pages filled with handwriting that belonged to Elena. It was her diary. She had written it over 4 years, hidden in the locked chest Roy never opened. Page after page told a different story than the one that reached the courtroom. Elena never intended to deceive him. She thought Roy knew, or at least suspected. She described their first meeting in detail, how open she felt, how seen she finally was, how she planned to tell him the truth, but the more he loved her, the more she feared that truth would destroy everything. She never wanted to hurt him, but she also never wanted to live in fear again. In the final entry, dated just 1 week before her death, she wrote, "I've started sleeping with the door unlocked. Maybe that's stupid. Or maybe I just want to believe he'd understand." The journal was sealed in evidence, never made public. But those who read it said one thing: if Roy had read just 1 page, she might still be alive. This case isn't just about a murder. It's about identity, perception, and what happens when fear meets silence. But now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? What would you have done if you were in Roy's shoes? And more importantly, do you think Elena ever truly felt safe in her own home? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more twisted true crime cases like this, where nothing is what it seems, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We drop new episodes every day, and trust me, they only get darker from here. This is Dark Motives, and sometime, the scariest monsters are the ones who wear a badge.